What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. This video we're looking at Week 2 NFL for Draftkings and FanDuel. So let's get started. Hopefully you guys had a good Week 1. It was kind of a struggle personally, and some of the people that I talked to also struggled, so it was good to know that I wasn't the only one. Usually Week 1s are always the most volatile because we don't know what a lot of these teams are going to do, especially this year with no preseason. So I'm not going to let it bother me too much. I'm looking forward to Week 2 and getting back on track in a big way. So let's get started. As always, I appreciate it if you hit the like button on the video and subscribe if you have not already. If you want to join for the bounce back, you can visit the website. Links in the top of the description, or it's the dfsprocess.net. So let's get started. Now, this slate has 13 games. There are a couple of games and a couple of teams that I'm really, really high on. A couple of game stacks that look appealing. Some of the favorite teams that I love to target this week is going to be the Packers. I think you can run it back with the Lions stack. I like the Cowboys and Falcons game stack. Looks like my favorite on the slate. I like the Colts players. I like a couple of the Vikings guys, especially like Thielen. And I like the Cardinals because they have $6,100 Kyler Murray, 59 Kenyon Drake, and 77 for Hopkins. Like that three-man stack can account for 60% of the offense this week. And then I guess you could look at it like Baltimore and Houston as well, but I really like some of these other teams that I just mentioned. So let's get started. I'll touch on some of the guys that I really like at each position. So quarterback, if you're paying up, you can pay up for Lamar Jackson. Every single week he's going to look good. There's going to be very few weeks where he goes out and busts because, a lot of those guys with the legs, they just have a higher floor. So especially with the talent that Lamar Jackson has against Houston, should be another high-scoring game. So no problem with him there. Mahomes is 77. He is also expensive. I like Jackson a little bit more just because he gives you more upside with the legs at only $500 more. Probably won't get to Mahomes because I do like a lot of these quarterbacks in the 6K range. That is where we're getting a lot of these high totals with Rodgers at 6,900 against Detroit. He absolutely carved up the Vikings defense. They have a bunch of young guys in the secondary, and he absolutely just made them look silly. He's completed 73% of passes. He had 4 touchdowns. Now, Rodgers is going to be kind of, he's not going to be volatile every week, but there's going to be some weeks where he doesn't have, 4 touchdowns. He's going to have a couple touchdowns, 1 or 2. That's because Aaron Jones is going to run in for a couple. They also scored a bunch of points, so I do like Rodgers a lot, but I don't know if I like him at 6,900. Prescott in this game is my favorite game stack of the week. Cowboys and Falcons. Both offenses have so many good guys. Both offenses are loaded. Prescott coming off of a loss, he kind of struggled. Just didn't look very crisp. He was facing off against a tough defense and a tough secondary, so it's a completely different scenario for him this week. Definitely can bounce back. He's also another guy that has upside with his legs. Josh Allen at 67. He might get forgotten about, but he's in the prime spot against Miami. He has as much upside with the legs as any quarterback does on the slate. The guys that I'm not that interested in is like Tom Brady at 65, just because I could get up to Josh Allen for $200 more. I could get up to Prescott and Rodgers, or go down for Kyler Murray. All those guys have more upside than Tom Brady at this stage of his career, just from my opinion. I mean, if Brady's going to go off, then he's going to have to throw for 4 touchdowns because we know, for God's sake, he's not going to get it done with his legs. Roethlisberger, I'm also not that interested in this week. I'm not expecting a shootout this game. I think both defenses are solid. Could see kind of a lower scoring game, so I'm not that interested in Ben Roethlisberger. I like Stafford if he gets some of his weapons back. If he gets Galladay back, I think Galladay and Stafford look like a pretty good pairing. But personally, it's just tough to pass up on Kyler Murray this week in cash, at least. In GPPs, you can make exceptions because there's 26 quarterbacks going this week. But in cash, I think it's tough not to have Murray. Wentz absolutely fell apart at the end of the second quarter. He had 2 touchdowns going into halftime, then he threw a pick, and then he threw another pick, and then he absolutely completely fell apart, and it was never the same. Now he gets a tougher matchup against the Rams. I'm not interested in him this week. Cousins at 59, I guess you could look to him if you need a cheap quarterback, but I mean, you have Murray for $200 more. I like him more. Gardner Minshew, I'm not that interested. Trubisky saved people that played him with the fourth quarter performance. He was awful for the first 3 quarters. He's 5,500 facing off against a bad Giants team. He's like another cheap guy to consider. So the cheapest guy I'm going is Trubisky. I don't like anybody else below him. But Kyler Murray is my favorite guy. At running back, McCaffrey is 10K. On this slate, there's like no value right now. That could change because as soon as we get to receiver, you'll see this long list of questionable players. A lot of this questionable tags are probably just precautionary, but who knows? We'll definitely find some value maybe if some of those guys sit. But right now it's tough to get up to McCaffrey against Tampa. I like a lot of cheaper running backs. I like Henry is 7,900. He has monster upside. Elliott 8,200. I like those guys a bit more just based on the price tag. Saquon was struggling really badly. He had 6 yards, just worst game of his career in terms of running the ball. He had 6 catches for 60 yards, which saved some of his fantasy line, but he averaged 0.4 yards per rush. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense is very tough, and now he's going up against a Bears front, which is also tough, so I would rather go down to Henry or Elliott. Cook is 76. People see that big 1 next to his name and might shy away, but it's been one game, and I'm expecting a high-scoring game in this one, so I don't mind going with Cook. Eckler was super disappointing. I mean, got a touch on Eckler. He's 6,500, so his price tag went down by a lot, by $500. He did get 19 carries, but just didn't get involved at all in the passing game. They're probably going to change that this week because they're facing off against Kansas City, and they're going to probably be trailing, so they're going to have to throw a lot. But it was just surprising that Tyrod Taylor did not look at Eckler's way, and I'm sure that's something that the coaches are going to hone in on this week, so I definitely don't mind going to him. He's probably not going to get that much ownership. Raheem Mostert I like at 64. He's like the one piece of the 49ers, who I do like. Todd Gurley at 6,100. He was on pace to have a very good game, and then the Seahawks just were leading by multiple touchdowns, so they did not run the ball very much at all in the second half. He probably had like 3 or 4 carries in the entire second half after having like 10 in the first half. So definitely think that's going to change. He also will probably get a little bit more involved in the passing game. 2 catches for 1 yard. Can't do much worse than that. So I think 6,100 for him in against Dallas, who just got carved up by the Rams running game. I'll have some interest in him. It doesn't look like the Falcons are gonna reduce his workload. Maybe at the end of the season they might, but it's not like they're gonna reduce the workload like the Rams did last year. I mean, they signed him, so feel pretty good about Gurley this week. He was on pace to get around 20 carries, and 20 carries for him against Dallas maybe can get you multiple touchdowns. Sanders, I like at 6K. We don't really know his workload, so it's kind of questionable. That's a question mark on him right now. Could be worth it in tournaments because the Rams can get punished by the run. Kenyon Drake at 59, super cheap. Got 16 carries, had 18 touches. He's going to be like the third guy on the offense besides Murray and Hopkins. He's going to be the third guy to get a lot of the volume. No problem going to him. But I really like Jonathan Taylor, 5,700. It's against a pretty poor defense. They're really young right now, and I'm expecting them to get kind of carved up this year. So Taylor, who stepped in pretty nicely after Marlon Mack got injured, not that much in the running game, but he had 6 catches for 67 yards. Naheem Hines stole his touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns, did Himes. So I do expect Taylor to kind of maybe work his way into the red zone a little bit more this week. Or maybe they trust Hines more, don't really know. But the coach already came out and said that Taylor will take over the running back 1 duties and Hines will still get work in. So expecting maybe like a 70-30 split or a 60-40 split. But with how often Phillip Rivers likes to check down to running backs, it's going to be a good season for both of those guys. So really like Jonathan Taylor. And then we have more value. I'm not that interested in playing 37-year-old, although it feels like he's 50-year-old Frank Gore against that 49ers front. Just not that interested. If Philip Lindsay is out, which he's probably going to miss this week, then Gordon looks to be a nice guy. We know we had no problem paying like $7K plus for him last couple of years when he was splitting some work with Eckler, and now that he is going to be the first guy if Lindsay is indeed out, then I'll have interest even though the matchup is tough. Like it's scary, but $5,200 Melvin Gordon is as cheap as you're going to get. So definitely think Gordon is in play, and then that's kind of it for cheap running backs unless somebody gets injured the next couple days. I'm not that interested in targeting anybody else. One guy that I forgot about is Benny Snell. This is going to be just in case Connor misses. If Connor misses, then he's going to be a really nice play at 4,500, even though the matchup is tougher. So that's kind of it. Josh Adams, he only had 2 carries, but could work his way into the offense more with no Bell. And then Peyton Barber got the touchdowns, but they have so many guys that it's going to be a guessing game all year. So yeah, for right now I feel good about the mid-range at running back with Gurley and Taylor, and then if I'm paying up, it's going to be for Henry or Elliott as my top 2 guys. Moving on to wide receiver, if you like Kyler Murray, it's tough not to like him without Hopkins. You can pair both of them. Murray had a very big game because he almost had 100 yards rushing. He had 91 yards on the ground with a rushing touchdown. He only had 1 passing touchdown, but he still put up 27 fantasy points because he has so much upside with his legs. 91 yards, that's 9 fantasy points, get you that 6 for the touchdown. So bunch of upside with him with the legs. The Washington defense, they looked like they were going to give up 40 points to the Eagles in that first quarter and a half, and then they just took over. I think it was mainly because Carson Wentz I don't know what happened to him, but it just wasn't the same after some of those interceptions. But Murray, I'm expecting him to have a big game. I like Hopkins paired with him. I mean, you want to get interest in some of these top receivers. You have a lot of guys in good spots, so I kind of think the ownership is going to be kind of spread around between Hopkins and Devontae Adams and like Julio and Thielen. I probably want to get at least 1, if not 2 of those guys at the top, which is why I'm going a bit cheap at running back. But Hopkins I like a lot at 77. Devontae Adams I also like at 81 if you can get up there. Julio is just 7,400. He is just $600 separated from Calvin Ridley. It was kind of the same story for Julio. A big week in terms of yardage, a poor week in terms of getting his way into the end zone. If for some reason he always struggles to get into the end zone with Matt Ryan throwing, last couple of years especially. Now Ridley's kind of been some of that, I guess, taking some of that work. He had 12 targets, 2 touchdowns, but a lot of this volume is because they threw the entire second half, which is something you're not going to get every single week. But in this type of game script, I like both guys. I think I would rather go to Julio than Calvin Ridley. At $600 more, I'll just find some savings somewhere else. We have some pretty good options in that below 7K range. Speaking of Ridley, I think you could play him. We have Allen Robinson at 6,400 against a terrible Giants defense. We have Mike Evans at 64, although it's too many mouths to feed on that offense. Every week you're going to have multiple guys that should go off that just don't because there's too many guys to feed. Will Fuller is cheap, but I'm not sure I buy the volume that he had in week 1. Marquise Brown I like at 6,200 for sure. I could look at Terry McLaurin, although I'm not sure I completely trust Dwayne Haskins. And then we have Marvin Jones. If Golladay misses again, then he is going to look pretty nice against Green Bay. We have very cheap Keenan Allen. Didn't really get on the same page with Tyrod Taylor in that first week. I just don't think Tyrod Taylor is very good. So I'm not that interested. But 57 for Keenan Allen is going to be one of the cheapest price tags we get all year. And then T.Y. Hilton had a kind of a rough week. Did not want both of those guys. T.Y. Hilton had a rough week. He had just 4 catches. He got outplayed by Paris Campbell. His price tag went down to 57, just $100 difference, but he's facing the Colts. It's at home in the Dome, so it's a good spot for T.Y. Hilton. He has had some big games in his career at home. Not only that, but I'm expecting him to get back on the same page with Phillip Rivers. He had some opportunities, 9 targets. Usually he's going to get like 6 or 7 of those 9 targets. Only 4 catches out of 9 targets. That's a pretty poor week for T.Y. Hilton. He had a couple of passes that he just dropped that he normally wouldn't. So bad week, great price tag. 57 for T.Y. Hilton. He's like cheaper than guys that you just shouldn't be cheaper than, like McLaurin and Parker and Chark, some of those guys that I definitely think T.Y. Hilton has upside. Should at least be in the 6K range. But really cheap at 57. I like Marvin Jones if Golladay misses again. Then you could take a shot on one of these Green Bay guys like Lazard. I like Lazard a little bit more than Valdez Scantling. And then punting with some wide receivers below 5,000. Golden Tate, if he plays, he's cheap. That's all I can really say about him. Russell Gage got a bunch of looks because of how much they threw in the second half. It's something you're not going to count on every week, especially if he gets more ownership. CeeDee Lamb at 47, he could look his way. I like this game a lot. He was on the field for most of the snaps. Every time they lined up with 3 wide receivers, he was on the field. 6 targets. They also have a lot of mouths to feed, but 47 for him is really, really cheap. And then you could look at Paris Campbell. If you want to go cheaper than T.Y., you could play him. And Chris Kirk is just 4,300. He's not going to get a lot of the same targets that he got last year, obviously, but he's really cheap. And then that's kind of it, really. If you want to look at Deontay Johnson, you could play him. He's also pretty affordable in the mid 4K range. But I like going with a couple of more, like the mid-range at wide receiver with like Hilton, or going all the way out for like Hopkins and Devontae Adams and Julio. Moving on to tight end, hopefully get some more value this week because it's kind of tough to get all the guys you want to pay up for. But at tight end, see, George Kittle is dealing with another injury. Says he expects to play Sunday, so there we go. Coming off of a bad game. He could bounce back, but there's no way I'm going to have the cap to pay up for a tight end this week. Going cheap at tight end this week. The cheapest guy that I like is probably TJ Hawkinson, is like the most expensive guy that I'd consider if Galladay misses. If Galladay plays, then it's a little bit less interest in him. We have some cheap guys like Jonnu Smith to look at. But the guy that a lot of people are on this week, and tight end is just kind of ugly this week. A lot of guys in tough spots, a lot of guys that just are not going to run a lot of routes, but a guy like Thomas of the Washington football team now, he played 77 or 74% of the plays. He ran routes on a majority of those. Sprinkle started at tight end, as you can kind of read the blurb, but didn't really get that involved. He got a touchdown. He got 8 targets, so that's, well, you kind of want to have a tight end, a guy that's going to get targets. He's going to run a lot of the routes, and he's for sure going to run a lot of the routes. They don't have a lot of receivers that they can count on besides Terry McLaurin, so Thomas is going to be like that second guy that Haskins looks to. And that's kind of it for me with the video. I'll kind of stop giving plays out there. And then defense, I also think I'll go cheap at defense this week because I want to pay up unless we get some more value this week. Some cheap defenses that you can punt with. I guess the cheapest I'm looking at is like the Giants. We know their defense isn't good, but Trubisky also can have terrible weeks where he turns the ball over. If they get one of those to find their way into the end zone, that's all it's going to really take to hit value. You could look at the Jets at 2K. They are facing off against a tough offense, but their 2K can do much worse than that. And then I guess the Broncos look at least a little bit appealing against Pittsburgh at 2,500. The Eagles look okay at 26. And that's kind of it for me. I'm not paying up at defense. Going below $2,900 is probably, I'm not going above 3K for a defense this week. So that's it for the DraftKings breakdown. Kind of a long video, but hopefully that gave you guys an idea of what kind of guys I'm on this week. And let's touch on FanDuel. A lot of these guys are similar, but just touch on the pricing just to run through it. All right, this week at FanDuel quarterback, no surprise, Lamar Jackson is 9,500. That is always fine to get to. It's going to be tough for me this week because I do want to pay up at receiver, especially. I'm not that interested in going with any quarterback above 9K. I think both guys obviously have as much upside in the world, but we could see some of these other guys cheaper that have similar upside. On FanDuel, Kyler Murray is a lot more expensive than he is on DraftKings, so that's like a spot where I kind of prefer Rodgers more at 7,900. I like Matt Ryan more at 77. I don't know why Cousins is 74. Pretty expensive for Kirk Cousins. But Stafford at 72, I like him. So FanDuel quarterbacks are a little bit different with the pricing and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't see myself going above 8K this week at quarterback. I think Matt Ryan looks really good, or Rodgers, one of those guys. I feel like Matt Ryan at 77 might get a bit overlooked So I'll go with him. At running back, we have McCaffrey. It's 10-5. FanDuel's easier to pay up for guys, but I just don't want to pay all the way up this week. I like going with maybe not the top tier at some of these positions, but definitely like the 1B. So running back, I'm looking at Derrick Henry at 8,300 against the Jaguars defense. He could just crush them this week. David Johnson is too expensive, 7,200. Aaron Jones is decently priced, 7,700. Sanders looks a little bit too expensive for the uncertainty in his workload. Melvin Gordon is priced where he kind of should be. We got more value here, though. We have Jonathan Taylor at 58, so he's going to be a cheap guy that I'm going to have for sure. And then we have the other guy that I mentioned on DraftKings. You see where Todd Gurley slots in this week. Doesn't seem to be super expensive. He's 7K, so that looks to be a pretty nice bargain. He is, a little bit more expensive than Eckler. Definitely you could play him if you want this week. But I think I'll probably go up for at least one of these running backs on FanDuel, whether it be Elliott or Henry. Currently, I like Henry just because I think he is going to get probably multiple touchdowns this week, although it's tough to bet on that. But I do feel really good about Henry. At wide receiver, Devontae Adams, perfect pair to pay up for if you want. I mean, if you want to play Rodgers, you could pair him with Adams, like one of the best stacks of the week. Hopkins at 83 looks really good. Galladay is much more expensive on FanDuel. Thielen looks pretty nice at his price point. And then Cooper and Ridley. Ridley is a lot cheaper than Julio is on FanDuel, so you could go Ridley over him if you want. And then the same kind of value guys that I like T.Y. Hilton at 63, Marvin Jones if Galladay misses. Both those guys look appealing. Will Fuller looks a lot better at just 6,100 on FanDuel. But I'm definitely going to be paying up for some wide receivers. I think that it's going to be, we're going to see some big games once again this week for a lot of these guys. So give me Hopkins at 83 and give me Devontae Adams. Both guys are going to get peppered with targets. Still leaves you with 53.25 left for go with a value wide receiver like a T.Y. Hilton if you want, or go with more cheap guys depending on who's in or out. But those guys are going to get 50% of the targets, 40% at least. Julio also looks good too at 8,200. Tight end. I like Hawkinson. Is only 56 on FanDuel. I like him. I like Hayden Hurst a little bit. And then we got Thomas. See where he slots in for Washington. He is 47, Logan Thomas. So pretty good price for him if you want to go cheap. Blake Jarwin is out. So see what his backup is. Not that interested either way, because I don't think he's going to get a lot of volume, but I think it was Schultz who got some work. He's only 4K, so maybe, but that's going to be a very, very low owned tournament play. But right now, I feel good about Thomas. If Galladay ends up sitting, then I probably will go up to Hawkinson, but right now, Ian Thomas kind of gives me what I want out of my tight end spot. And then we still get left with 55 left, so let's see. We can go with a flex. Let's see. If we go defense, go with a cheap defense. Just plug in somebody. Defense this week goes all the way down to 3,500. Or 3K, you can get your cheapest defense at 3,000 this week. Not interested in the Texans against Baltimore. Pass on the Chargers. Pass on the Falcons. Pass on the Panthers. Pass on the Lions. The Jets are the cheapest defense that I have in some interest in at 35. I guess the Cardinals are also in play on FanDuel at 3,600. Dwayne Haskins is going to be prone to blow-ups because he turns the ball over a lot. Although he was good at it last week. It was just a one-week sample. But yeah, definitely like the Cardinals defense. Leaves you with 6,500 left. You could even go up to another wide receiver if you want. So that's kind of it for me. Just giving you guys some plays that I like. If you wanted to go up to Kyler Murray, you can do that as well. It's a bit, he's a little bit more expensive, but I think he makes sense to pair with Hopkins. So yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, my quarterback this week, I'm gonna have Hopkins. Murray, Rodgers, Ryan on FanDuel are the three guys that I have the most interest in. So definitely, gonna be tough for me to decide. But right now, I think Murray looks the best just because I love Hopkins. So that's kind of it for me this week. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it, and best of luck.